The judge's words cut through the silent courtroom like a cold knife, sharp enough that even the spectators seemed to forget how to breathe. At the center of it all sat a woman whose uniform no longer fit the body she once trusted. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the muscles beneath her medals weakened by an injury that had taken more than mobility. It had taken parts of her life she never fully admitted losing. But her eyes, clear and steady, didn't blink as Judge Harland pronounced the order that would echo through the room with humiliating clarity. He told a decorated Navy SEAL, one of the rare women to earn that title, that she must remove her silver star. Not because she falsified anything, not because her valor was questioned, but because, as he put it, the standards of presentation must reflect current ability, not past performance. No one moved. No one spoke. The air itself seemed to harden. The woman, Lieutenant Commander Mara Leeton, had survived explosions, ambushes, and operations so classified they didn't even have names on paper. Yet nothing had prepared her for this moment, this public stripping of honor disguised as administrative procedure. Harland's gaze lingered on her as though he expected her to crack, to fold under the weight of humiliation. Instead, she lifted her trembling hand and unclipped the silver star from her chest. The absence of the medal left a small, empty rectangle on her uniform, a ghost of recognition erased by a stroke of arrogance. The judge extended his palm. She placed the medal in it without lowering her eyes. There were people in the courtroom who would later swear they saw her fingers shake. Others would insist she seemed carved from stone. But the truth lived somewhere deeper beyond expression, beneath composure, where memories of gunfire and the burning desert wind still lived beside moments of impossible courage. Outside, whispers trailed her like shadows. Some pitied her, some didn't understand, and some believed the judge was right. But Mara felt none of it. She moved through the hallway as though surrounded by the echoes of her past operations, her team's voices, the thrum of the helicopter rotor, the sickening silence after the explosion that had put her in the wheelchair for months. She had returned from that mission alive, but barely, and she had returned having saved 3 team members, dragging them out of the fire while her leg bled into the sand. That was the mission that earned her the Silver Star, a medal Judge Harland had now held in the air like contraband. But Mara didn't feel defeated, not yet. Something else simmered under her skin, a slow, rising heat that was not anger alone, but a sense of justice twisting awake. Harland believed this was the final chapter of her service, a gentle administrative burial. He had no idea he had just provoked the beginning of something far larger. As she moved toward the exit, the building's fluorescent lights flickered overhead. She paused at the doors, her hands steady now, her breath controlled. What Harland couldn't see, what no one saw, was that beneath her quiet exit, her resolve had crystallized into something sharper than steel. He had taken her medal, but she would take something far more permanent. He simply hadn't realized it yet. Long before anyone understood the storm she carried inside her, Mara retreated into the quiet of her small apartment overlooking the city. The evening light pooled through the blinds in thin golden bars, cutting across the room like the disciplined lines of a formation. She removed her uniform slowly, each motion deliberate, as though peeling away the remnants of humiliation inch by inch. When the fabric finally dropped, she stared down at the faint indentation left by the missing medal. It was strange how a patch of empty cloth could hurt more than shrapnel ever had. Her service dog, Ranger, padded over and rested his head against her leg. His breathing was steady, grounding. She ran a hand over his fur, feeling the warmth bloom beneath her palm. It reminded her that the world still held small, honest truths, but truth, she knew, meant nothing without proof. And proof was something Harland had never expected her to chase. Across town, Judge Harland was already celebrating. He sat behind a polished mahogany desk in his private chambers, swirling whiskey in a crystal glass, basking in the satisfaction of his own decision. He believed he had defended the integrity of military recognition. What he didn't know, what he had never bothered to learn, was that Mara had spent years building a spotless record. Every operation she touched had been documented, reviewed, and authenticated. Every commendation had been earned with sweat, blood, and sacrifice. But Harland had built his verdict on something darker: resentment. He had long believed disabled veterans weakened the image of service. Mara, with her cane, her scars, and her undeniable competence, challenged that world, used simply by existing. Mara sat at her desk and opened the encrypted laptop she hadn't touched in months. The screen glowed softly, illuminating her face as classified files began to load. She wasn't looking for revenge, she was looking for clarity. Yet as she scrolled through her mission reports, a pattern began to emerge, one she had never noticed before. Harland's signature had appeared on documents he should never have seen: judicial reviews of classified operations, adjustments to commendation approvals, notes about combat, injuries written by someone with no medical authorization. He had been involved in the oversight of missions far beyond his jurisdiction, reaching into the careers and reputations of dozens of service members. Mara stared at the screen, her pulse steady but colder now. The judge who had stripped her honor had built his authority on foundations that didn't exist. Her mind drifted back to the mission that earned her the Silver Star, the burning wreckage, the sand soaked with blood, the taste of smoke so thick she could barely breathe. She remembered crawling through the flames to pull Sergeant Vega and Petty Officer Ellis out before the second blast. She remembered her leg giving out, the weight of another teammate slumped over her shoulder, and the realization that she might not make it back. Harland had never stood in sand that burned through your boots. He had never felt the heat of an explosion against his back. Yet he had decided she no longer deserved the honor she almost died earning. She shut the laptop and leaned back, feeling the weight of her discovery tighten around her like a silent vow. If Harland wanted to take her past, she would uncover his. Her next move wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be messy. It would be precise, controlled, and unshakable, the kind of move only a Navy SEAL, disabled or not, could execute with absolute clarity. Mara picked up her cane and rose from her chair. For the first time since the hearing, there was no tremor in her hand. Harland thought he had ended her career. He had no idea he had just threatened the wrong survivor. The next morning unfolded with a muted gray sky, the kind that seemed to weigh on the city like an unspoken warning. Mara moved with a deliberate calm, every step measured but unhesitating. Her cane tapped lightly against the floor as she entered the military archives, an immense temperature, controlled vault where decades of sealed records slept beneath layers of security. Most veterans never stepped foot inside. Even fewer had the clearance to request internal judicial correspondences. Mara did. The clerk at the front desk greeted her with a hesitant smile. People often didn't know how to address a disabled SEAL, whether to treat her like she was fragile or invincible. Mara spared the woman the worry by offering a nod that carried the steadiness of someone who knew exactly why she was here. The records arrived in a stack thicker than she expected, delivered in 2 heavy binders sealed with red security clasps. As she opened them at a corner table, the sterile scent of archival paper rose like dust disturbed after years of silence. Ranger lay at her feet, ears alert, his presence a reminder of every battlefield she had crossed. Page after page revealed a deeper rot, each signature from Harland connecting him to decisions that reached far beyond his authority. He had intervened in commendations, overturned medical classifications, and blocked promotions for wounded or disabled veterans, always quietly, always couched in bureaucratic language that masked cruelty with legality. He had reshaped careers with the same detachment he used to swirl whiskey in his crystal glass. And he had done it for years. Mara's hand paused on one file, one name, Lieutenant Colonel Jordan Hale, a respected officer who had mysteriously disappeared from service records after sustaining a combat injury. The notes suggested his commendation had been revoked, then sealed. Harland had stamped the document himself. Mara remembered Hale vaguely, an instructor she trained under, a man who taught with calm precision and believed that strength could take any form, so long as it was paired with discipline. The idea that Harland had buried his career tightened something deep within her chest. She copied the file references, knowing that each fragment would contribute to something larger, a pattern that would reveal Harland for what he truly was. Not a judge defending integrity, but a man reshaping honor to fit his own narrow view of worth. As she left the archives, cold air brushed against her face. It carried the sharp bite of winter, but beneath it flowed something steadier, a sense of rising purpose. She didn't rush. She moved with the unhurried steadiness of someone preparing for a mission. SEALs never charged blindly. They observed, they listened, they calculated. Meanwhile, Harland followed his routine with the smug predictability of someone confident he had already won. He walked through the courthouse corridors with a faint smirk, greeting colleagues as though he had single-handedly safeguarded the dignity of the military. His steps echoed with quiet arrogance, each stride revealing his certainty that Mara Leeton had been neatly tucked away, silenced by humiliation. He had no idea she had spent the early hours cross-referencing every classified approval he had ever touched, mapping his unauthorized movements through military protocol with the calm precision of a tactician. By afternoon, Mara sat across from Captain Emerson, an internal affairs officer with a reputation for being unflinchingly fair. Emerson's expression shifted gradually as he read through the compiled documents, the faint crease between his brows deepening with every page. When he finished, he lowered the folder slowly, as though suddenly aware it contained something volatile. Mara said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth spoke clearly through the paper. What followed was silent, not uncomfortable, not tense, but heavy with realization. Emerson understood exactly what Harland had done, and he understood what this meant for Mara. Finally, he nodded not with sympathy, but with respect. Her case was no longer personal, it was systemic, and she was not just a former SEAL seeking justice. She was now the catalyst of something far greater. In that quiet office, beneath the fluorescent lights, the first crack formed in Harland's carefully constructed facade. He didn't know it yet, but Mara had already taken the first irreversible step toward the moment that would end his career. The investigation unfolded quietly at first, a soft ripple beneath the surface of official channels. Captain Emerson moved with a politeness that masked a razor-sharp focus, gathering testimonies, referencing documents, and pulling sealed records long buried beneath layers of judicial privilege. Mara remained on the periphery, not out of avoidance but discipline. She knew when to engage and when to step back, allowing the truth to gather its own momentum. Still, she felt the tremor in the air, the subtle shift that happens just before a storm announces itself. Weeks passed. Harland began noticing small irregularities. Colleagues whispering as he approached, unexpected pauses in meetings, and uncharacteristic courtesy from officers who usually ignored him. He shrugged it off as respect for his recent ruling, unaware that each polite nod was backed by silent scrutiny. He still walked with the confidence of someone who believed he had locked his world into a perfect shape. But cracks had already begun to fracture beneath his feet. The first blow came in the form of a summons, delivered by a junior officer who tried to keep her hands from shaking. Harland scoffed at the request to appear before an internal inquiry. He believed the matter trivial, perhaps procedural. But as the days progressed and questions sharpened, his arrogance thinned, revealing the nervous twitch beneath the veneer. They confronted him with documents he did not expect to see again, commutations he had altered, commendations he had stripped without cause, and sealed medical reviews he had manipulated to remove wounded veterans from active recognition. His explanations fell apart like thin paper exposed to rain. Outside the inquiry room, Mara waited in a hallway lined with plaques honoring service members across decades. She ran her fingers lightly over the etched names, breathing in the quiet dignity of their legacy. Ranger lay beside her, tail resting against her boot, his presence a reminder that courage took many forms. A door opened. Emerson stepped out and met her gaze. He didn't speak, but the shift in his expression, somber, resolute, told her everything. Inside, Harland was unraveling. One by one, the officers of the panel confronted him with the truth he had hidden under years of legal jargon. They pressed him not with anger, but with clarity, the kind of clarity that leaves no room to hide. He realized too late that he was not the judge here. He was the defendant. The final turning point arrived when they presented the testimony of Lieutenant Colonel Jordan Hale. He appeared on a secure video call, his voice steady despite the edges of old pain. He detailed how Harland had erased his commendation after his injury, how he had been denied support, and how his career had ended not because of inability, but because of a signature Harland had no right to wield. Harland tried to interrupt, but the panel silenced him. For the first time in years, he knew what it felt like to be powerless. By the end of the hearing, the verdict was clear. Harland was to be removed from his position, stripped of authority, and investigated for abuse of judicial power. He did not walk out with the rigid posture he had entered with. His steps were uncertain, the weight of consequences pressing down with a force far greater than he had ever imposed on others. When he emerged into the hallway, he saw Mara leaning on her cane, quiet and composed. Their eyes met, not in triumph or bitterness, but in something deeper. A reckoning. Harland looked away first. Mara didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence held the weight of every service member he had diminished, every sacrifice he had dismissed, every honor he had tarnished. It was a silence stronger than any accusation. Later, when Emerson approached her with the reinstated silver star encased in polished glass, Mara didn't lift it immediately. She stared at it for a long, thoughtful moment. It was the same medal she had earned in the sand and fire years ago, but it felt different now. Not because of the metal, but because of the journey that had brought it back to her hands. When she finally held it, her grip was steady, stronger than it had been the day she removed it in that courtroom. This time, no one tried to take it from her. As she walked out of the building, Ranger at her side, a breeze moved through the courtyard, brushing against her as though the world itself acknowledged what she had done, not just for herself, but for countless others who would never know her name. Mara didn't seek victory, she sought truth, and in the end that quiet pursuit did what no battle, no explosion, no enemy had ever accomplished. It ended the career of the man who underestimated her, and restored something far greater than a medal her place in a legacy she had earned with every breath, every scar, and every unbroken step forward.